Hi guys, welcome to the channel of love. Okay, study group. Dr. Wayne Dyer, you'll see it when you believe it. Chapter 2, Thought. You are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. Chapter 2, Thought. Thought is much more than something that you do. It is in fact what you and all of the rest of us are as well. Thought constitutes our entire being except for the portion of us that is form, or the packaging that carries around our minds. Try thinking of thought as something that exists not only within you, but outside of you as well. This may be difficult because you are accustomed to believing that your thoughts are an internal mechanism that guides the part of you that is form. Try instead to consider thought as a universal that you were born into. It is something that you do, as well as something that you are. Once you get used to this new idea, it will become easier and easier for you to view all thought as something that is very much a part of you. Here is a mini lesson in what thought is. Your desire to improve your life is really your thought to improve your life. Your will to live is really your thought to live. Your attitudes about your entire life are really your thoughts on these matters. Your entire past up until this moment is really nothing more than thought. Your entire future from this moment onward is nothing but thought. Your relationships to everyone in your life are nothing more than thought. Your determination to succeed is nothing more than your thought to do so. The idea of success is really the thought of success. Since you can never get behind the eyeballs of another human being and feel as that person does, you are actually one step removed from that person's process and experience him or her also through thought. You relate to everything and everyone on this planet through the mechanism of thought. It is not what is in the world that determines the quality of your life. It is how you choose to process your world in your thoughts. So many highly respected thinkers in desperate disciplines have concluded that thought, the mind, is a total determiner of how our lives will go. The Dutch philosopher Spinoza said, "I saw that all things I feared, and which feared me, had nothing good or bad in them, save insofar as the mind was affected by them." Albert Ellis, the founder of rational emotion therapy, stated, "People and things do not upset us. Rather, we upset ourselves by believing that they can upset us. We become what we think about all day long," according to Ralph Waldo Emerson. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so, Shakespeare tells us. Abraham Lincoln said, "People are about as happy as they make up their mind to be." Change your thoughts and you change your world, was how Norman Vincent Peale put it. Jesus tells us, "As you think, so shall ye be." Our futures are formed by the thoughts we hold most often. We literally become what we think about, and we are all given the gift of being able to write our own story. For me, this is as close to an absolute truth as anything I know. In my parable, Gifts from Isis says, "There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way." My thoughts have always created my world. After my mother successfully reunited her family, and we lived on the east side of Detroit. I spent many nights watching The Tonight Show, starring Steve Allen, on a tiny black and white Admiral television set while everyone else slept. I loved Allen's zaniness. Sitting in that small living room in Morros Road, I would picture myself on The Tonight Show, and in my mind I would practice talking with Steve Allen. I would actually work on routines, editing this and that out of my conversation as I imagined myself being a guest on the show. But my mind's picture was not me at 13. It was me as an adult who was making an appearance and discussing things I knew to be true. Most of these guest appearances centred around my beliefs, held even then, that we are able to choose our own destiny, able to make others laugh. These thoughts were so real to me that I would tell my brothers and friends what I was going to say on The Tonight Show when I appeared. They considered me a kid with a wild imagination, who was always in another world anyway, and so they would humour me and move on to something more realistic. But my internal pictures were never damaged by the attitudes of others. For as long as I can remember, I have been able to enter this world of pure thought, and it is as real for me as the world of form is to all of us. Many times as a young boy, I would know what was going to happen to me before it actually occurred, because I had experienced it in my mind so often. As a youngster, I never did anything with this ability, and eventually I ceased telling others about it. As I mentioned in the introduction, when I returned to New York City in 1974, after my transformational experience at my father's grave, I knew that I had to make some big changes in my life. Though I loved teaching at the university, something inside of me said that I needed to go off on my own, needed to shift gears and go in an entirely new direction. I struggled for almost a year with the idea that I had to go out on my own and leave the security of the bi-monthly paycheck. I had wonderful pictures in my mind's eye. I saw myself talking to everyone in America about the ideas I had just finished writing about in Your Erroneous Zones. I could see in my mind that the book was going to be very successful. And so one day I announced to my advanced doctoral seminar that I would be leaving the university very shortly and going out on my own. After I made the announcement, I was in shock. Here I was only in the talking stages with my family, and yet I was making a public announcement. Apparently my form was allowing the invisible force of my inner world. Apparently my form was following the invisible force of my inner world. The morning came when the picture was very clear in my mind. I saw myself all alone in my venture, without any guarantees, and yet as peaceful as I had ever been in my lifetime. I knew that this was the day, that within a few hours I would officially be out on my own, no longer able to rely on a paycheck. When I arrived on campus, I went immediately to the dean's office. I had told my wife or family members that this was the day. It was the vision I had had that morning that made it clear for me. The entire process of my entering the dean's office was a mental one. All thoughts, all visions that were private to me, all images of myself that I could no longer erase. I could hardly believe it myself. Here I was, waiting to announce to the dean that I was resigning, effective within a few weeks at the end of the current semester. Our conversation was brief. I said I wanted to go out and do something that I genuinely believed in. She asked me to reconsider and discuss it with my family and some of my colleagues, but I told her that I was already accomplished in my mind, my thoughts, and that I was now simply going through the formality of making it real in the physical world as well. She pointed out all of the risks, how unlikely it was that I would be able to make a living writing and speaking, and that jobs such as the one I held were exceedingly difficult to come by in the 1970s because of the glut of professors and very few openings in the academic world. I told her that I was aware of the risk, and that was one of the big reasons why I was taking this turn in my life. I was headed down the path that Robert Frost called the road less travelled. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. When I left the Dean's office, I walked to my own with an inner glow. I was free to advance confidently in the direction of my dreams. I cleaned out my desk, made some announcements to my students and doctoral advisees, and drove home along the expressway knowing that I was taking the biggest step of my lifetime. Here I was, completely unknown to the media, leaving my secure position to go out and tell the world about the ideas in my new book. Yet, I was ecstatic, for I had seen all of it in my mind before experiencing it in the world of form. I discussed my new adventure with my wife and daughter, and they gave me their full support and encouragement. Since I had always been a responsible person, had always met my financial obligations, I relied on this history rather than creating in my mind some kind of impending disaster concerning my family obligations. We would use our accumulated savings, I would borrow money if need be, and we would scale down some of our expenditures if that became a necessity. My family was in complete agreement with me. Money was not going to be the reason to avoid following my bliss. They seemed to know that this was something that I had to pursue, and, as it's almost always the case when people love you, they not only encouraged me, but also seemed to have the same intuitive feeling that everything was going to work out just fine. They too were willing to take the risks, in the knowledge that we would all be happier for the effort. Every obstacle that came my way became an opportunity. I was told that there were a minimal number of copies of my book in print, and that even if I did go out and talk to people in the media, it would do no good because most bookstores would not have my book in stock. So I decided to buy up a large quantity of books and take them out to the people myself. I literally became my own distributor initially. I left my books on consignment with store owners across America in 1976. And I had the great fortune to have some wonderful people come into my life at just the right time. One such person, Donna Gould, became such an ardent believer after reading my book that she worked on her own time to help me get bookings all across the country. Donna knew I was paying most of my own expenses, and she contributed many hours of her time and tons of her energy to help me. My publisher became more of a believer as he saw the results of my excitement about this project. Before long, I was out in my own car, travelling from small city to smaller city, appearing on talk shows and doing local newspaper interviews. First I went up and down the East Coast, then to the Mid-Coast, and ultimately on a long cross-country tour with my wife and daughter, paying my own expenses, staying in cheap motels, and most important, enjoying every single minute of this new adventure. I seldom thought about making money. I had published 3 successful textbooks and many professional articles without financial profit. Consequently, I was not motivated now by a desire to make a fortune. I was simply doing something that I love to do and answering to no one along the way. Since I was using my own savings to finance this trip and to purchase the books, I had total control over every aspect of this promotion. As the months rolled by, my interview schedule increased to as many as 15 a day. Bookstores in cities that I had visited began to reorder from the publisher. At the start, I had been able to get bookings only in the smaller cities, but now the media in larger cities were beginning to book me on their shows. I had been told by an expert in publicity and publishing that the only way to talk to everyone in America in the 1970s was on network television, but that this option was pretty much closed to me because I did not have a national reputation. He suggested I should be happy if I sold a few thousand books in the local New York area, had a couple of printings, and got a publication credit towards a promotion at the university. This was the view of many others who knew the publishing industry inside out. They seemed to me to be unaware of the great truth of Victor Hugo. Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. What is an idea but a thought? The experts had their own ideas and they acted on them. I too had my idea. I agreed that the easiest way to talk with everyone in America was through the network media, but I believed it was not the only way. I could reach everyone in America if I was willing to take the time, spend the energy, and absorb the risks that go with such an approach. I was willing and very eager as well. I would use every barrier as an opportunity to see if I could get past it, and it worked every single time. As much as I was making things happen through my thoughts, I was also letting things happen by not fighting anyone or anything, by doing it all with good cheer and love. It was great fun, every single day, every interview, every new city, every new friend, all very exciting. The months became a year, and my family and I were still on the road. Somehow the financial stuff took care of itself, and then one day, while I was appearing on radio station KMOX in St. Louis, I received a call from Arthur Pine, my friend and agent, who informed me that my book would appear on the New York Times national bestseller list the following week, debuting at position number 8. I had accomplished what almost everyone said was impossible. Without one national television or radio appearance, I had been able to go to the people of this country and have enough of those people buy my book to put it on the national bestseller list. I was in awe and in shock. But this was only the beginning of how my internal images, my thoughts began manifesting. I was becoming informed what I had been thinking about each day, and most important, I was opening myself to allowing my purpose to find me. I had begun clearing myself of the negativity and judgment that had previously interfered with the flow of my process. Other changes started then. I began exercising each day, slowly at first, but very much an everyday thing. In August of 1976, I ran my first mile without stopping. At the end, I was huffing and puffing and in a state of exhaustion, but nevertheless I finished with a wonderful sense of inner satisfaction. The next day, I made the effort to accomplish this task again, then again on the following day, and within 1 week I was running a mile comfortably. 2 months later, I ran 8 miles without stopping, and thus began my running streak, which continues today of 8 miles per day, every day without fail, since October the 7th, 1976. I became more attentive to my eating habits and gradually discontinued many foods with which we recognise as nutritionally unsound. The clearer I became, the less negative and judgmental, the more I began to treat my physical self in healthier ways. As I allowed my purpose to find me, I began to feel happier and more in harmony with myself. Ultimately, it was as if I forgot about myself and tuned in automatically to my strong sense of mission and purpose. This is how the enlightened process seems to work. One proceeds through a series of phases of first focusing on oneself and consciously working at improving oneself until the inner tumult disappears. As that inner turmoil fades, you find yourself feeling much more purposeful in sharing yourself with others. When you have an inner authentic sense of love and harmony, that is precisely what you have to give away. Okay, I'm actually going to stop it there. It's a long chapter, guys. A very long chapter. There's a cut-off point here, actually. The how and why of visualization. So I'm going to read until then. Okay. So let's carry on then. So when you have an inner authentic sense of love and harmony, that is precisely what you have to give away. As my book began to appear regularly on bestseller lists across America, the demand for me to make personal and media appearances increased dramatically. Shows that previously had turned Donna down cold were now calling to check on my availability. One by one, I started making the circuit stops. And within a few months, the book had catapulted to the top of the list, where it was to stay for almost 2 years. Then one day, I received the magic phone call that was to lead to the fulfillment of that image I had had as a young boy watching television back on the east side of Detroit. Howard Parpush of the Tonight Show staff had been handed a copy of my book by someone at a party on Long Island. He took the book with him on his flight back to Los Angeles. The next week, I received a call from a staff person for the Tonight Show asking me if, when I was next in Los Angeles, I would be willing to come into the Burbank studios for a pre-interview for the show. Within 10 days, I was sitting in Howard's office talking to him about all of the ideas that I believed in so strongly. By this time, I had done hundreds of interviews, and I had learned that the best strategy was simply to be myself, just me, talking to whoever was interviewing me as if it were in my living room. Howard and I hit it off beautifully, and to this day remain very close friends. Within a week, I was to make my very first appearance on The Tonight Show. The guest host that Monday evening was Shecky Green, well-known Las Vegas comedian. As I stood in the hallway next to the green room before the start of the show, I noticed a bank of payphones. I decided to call my wife and share the excitement I was feeling. As I talked, I noticed someone using the telephone adjacent to me. It was the first guest of the evening, the man I had talked to so many times in my own head, almost nightly, nearly a quarter of a century before, Mr. Steve Allen. The evening's taping was sensational from my point of view. I had almost 15 minutes on national television to tell about the ideas that were so important to me. It was a dream come true. When I went to the airport to catch an all-night flight back to the East Coast, I was filled with elation. Then over a loudspeaker, I heard a page for my name. It was Howard on the phone to give me the bad news that the show had been preempted for the first time in many years because of an overrun at the Republican National Convention. It would not be shown until an unspecified future free date. I flew back home wondering if the show would ever be aired, but the following day I received another call from Howard asking me to fly out the next day to make an appearance with Johnny Carson, which would be aired that week. So I made a third cross-country flight, arrived in Los Angeles and did the show with Johnny on a Wednesday evening. But we had only 6 or 7 minutes at the end of the show. And because of the shortness of the interview, Johnny asked me on the air if I could stay over 2 days and reappear on Friday evening. I stayed over 2 days and did the show that Friday evening, and it went beautifully. A week from the next Monday, the preempted show aired. So I'd gone from an unknown person who was able to get himself booked only on local shows to one with 3 Tonight Show appearances on national television, all airing within an 11-day period. It seemed clear to me that Thoreau was absolutely right when he wrote, "If one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavours to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours." Your Erroneous Zones was eventually published in 26 languages around the world. Other books have followed, as have tapes, articles, international travel for professional speaking engagements, and an opportunity for me to make a difference in the lives of millions and millions of people. I received more money in the first year I was out on my own without the security of a regular paycheck than I had in an entire 36 years of my life before then. And that's where we're going to leave it. When we pick up again, so this will be chapter 2, part 1. Okay? Chapter 2, part 2 is going to be the how and why of visualization. But we're going to leave it there for today. Okay, guys, until I see you next time, take care. Bye for now.